The test at politicalcompass.org is wrong. I won't have the time to go into it in this video, but I'm not alone in believing this, and I'll put a link to Contrarian Dude's video in the description below. This video is my take on the political compass spectrum, which I believe is more accurate, though simplistic. It's based on what I've been seeing over the last couple decades in terms of political discussions, and after being unsatisfied with the output from my own tests and from the results I've seen from others. So what I've done is create what I call the Carroll political compass, mainly so people will know what I'm talking about when I'm referencing that either in this video or in future discussions compared to the politicalcompass.org test. If you've seen the results from that page before, you might notice a number of changes here. Let's look at it from the outside first and then the inside. So on the outside, I renamed the left and right to socialism and capitalism. This is the economic scale, spectrum, or axes. Some of the charts show communism at the far left, in the middle, but in reality all communist nations have had extreme authoritarian control, and communism has been in the real world has never been a purely economic construct. It's been an authoritarian social and economic political philosophy in practice. Socialism, however, is an economic system and is best represented at the other end of the economic scale, opposing capitalism. Now at the top, on the inside, I show where communism is, as well as fascism and imperialism on the authoritarian end of the social spectrum, whereas communism is the most authoritarian form of socialist government, and imperialism is the most authoritarian form of capitalist government. And fascism, I believe, I have it in the middle, as I believe it's more of a general term for a high level of authoritarian government or dictatorship without any sort of representation of the people, and that's regardless of economy. So now let's look at the bottom on the inside. I show the opposite end of the social scale, spectrum, or axes, whatever you want to call it, and in the middle is the direct opposite of fascism or dictatorship, which is democracy, generally speaking. And you notice on each side there are two different forms of libertarianism. Unsurprisingly, on the left is Socialist Libertarian. Generally this has been called libertarian socialism, but I believe when we're talking about this end of the social spectrum, socialism is merely a qualifier for this type of libertarian, very much in favor of a planned economy, but otherwise not restrictive of personal liberties. And on the right is a fiscal libertarian, which could also be called a capitalist libertarian, very much in favor of a free market. I'll offer a disclaimer here as someone who isn't an anarcho-anything that I personally believe that the communism as seen in anarcho-communism isn't exactly the same as communism, as I mentioned earlier, as the ultra-authoritarian government model as used in large governments. It seems to me that ANCOMs are more into communes and contracts with each other and sharing resources, etc. So I don't mean to offend anyone, and of course, as with everything I'm saying here, I welcome, informative or constructive criticism. Now let's look at what I consider the four groups of political philosophies in the Western world. I realize that these are general by nature, and there are a lot of unique variations, but here's what I believe, or how this has been portrayed in the media and how we understand it as American citizens. Traditionally in America, the entire left side of the spectrum was reserved for what we call the liberal political philosophy, and the entire right side was for the conservative political philosophy. And over the course of hundreds of years, there's been many different specialized types of liberalism and conservatism, and there have been scores of intellectual greats who have defined and redefined what these words mean. And to be honest, it's hard for the average person or the layman to fully understand what these labels all mean. And that's why I have these general group types based on what I'm seeing online and in the media today and in recent history, to be fair. Now, in this scheme that I'm proposing, I'm putting liberals and conservatives as a whole within the libertarian quadrants along the economic spectrum. As time has progressed and countless new laws, regulations, and mandates have been added to local, state, and federal governments, I believe that in North America as a whole, we have become more authoritarian over time, particularly since the New Deal, the 1960s, and beyond. So what people have recognized as liberal and conservative have been slowly outmoded by the large and powerful groups of people in power. Today, they're the majority of politicians, business people, mass media, and the education system who've attained such reach and power and do not wish to relinquish these things. I believe that they've been influenced in large part by European socialism, Marxist communism, and the powerful elites overseas in their own restrictive governments and societies who plan economies and restrict personal freedoms. Now, in large part, I believe the left and right sides of the spectrum are still represented by our Democrat and Republican parties, which are just names on a party and nothing more. But I believe the progressives are in control of the Democrat Party and the neoconservatives are in control of the Republican Party. Their goal is to amass more money and power in pursuit of their interests. The neocons want more military might and a planned economy that benefits their lobbyists, so they work with the progressives to give them the regulations, services, and programs they want for their lobbyists. I used to call the modern day progressives neoliberals. I caught a little flack from that because neoliberalism is an economic system, but I see progressive, neo-progressive, and regressive labels being used to represent this particular outlook, and that's fine by me. Some people who consider themselves neoconservatives may not feel like they fit in exactly with what I'm using to label as here, but I would argue the modern day neocons are selling themselves as anti-authoritarian, but in practice are still grabbing too much power. On the aside, if you want to know what the new term cultural libertarian fits on this spectrum, I believe it's merely the reflection of someone's libertarian social outlook and not really relevant to economic preference. You can prioritize socialism or capitalism and still be a cultural libertarian. The recipe is in the name. And this brings me to my final point about my scale versus the official one at politicalcompass.org and the one that Contrarian dude mentions on his YouTube channel, as I mentioned in an older video, that's there. Most, if not all, the questions asked are not ideological in nature. They're actually unrelatable to economic and social policy, and unfortunately, that's common among these online tests. My scale takes into account the extremes of the social and economic spectrums, as well as highlights 4 major Western political philosophies as divided into quadrants, and at least in America, shows where both the Democrat and Republican parties lie. And they can be used to paint a picture as to where the other political parties are, outside of America, but don't take the party platform at their word. Look at their actions in government and with the laws they pass and with the freedoms that they obstruct. So I encourage you to watch his video, and again, the link will be in the description below if you want to get a quick take on why it's flawed, and his particular take on the political spectrum in another video. I'll have them both there. That's going to do it for this video. Let me know what you think of it, and if you have any other questions or comments, you can do so down below. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.